Welcome to this explainer. Okay, imagine you're building a massive, towering skyscraper. You wouldn't just show up on an empty dirt lot with a bunch of concrete and steel and, just start guessing where the walls go, right? No way. You'd start with a rigorous architectural blueprint. Well, in pharmaceutical manufacturing, that blueprint is Stage 1 process design. Today, we're going to explore exactly how Stage 1 builds a commercial manufacturing process, not on guesswork, but on incredibly sound science. So let's kick things off with a pretty fundamental question. Can a successful lab formula just be scaled up directly to commercial manufacturing? The short answer? Absolutely not. Blindly scaling up a small pilot process to a massive commercial facility is literally a recipe for disaster. What works perfectly in a tiny beaker doesn't just magically work in a 10,000-liter tank. Without the rigorous stress testing and characterization we do in Stage 1, you are totally flying blind. To understand how we actually assemble this scientific blueprint, we'll quickly walk through these 5 sections. 1. Defining Stage 1 design. 2. The quality knowledge chain. 3. The science of process characterization. 4. Assessing process risks. And 5. The commercial control strategy. All right, jumping right into Section 1, Defining Stage 1 design, the scientific blueprint. Under the FDA's validation lifecycle, there are 3 stages, and Stage 1 is right at the starting line. It uses all that early development and scale-up knowledge to define the commercial process. But here is the absolutely crucial thing to remember. Stage 1 is entirely about designing the process on paper and in pilot labs. It is not the qualification of your equipment, and it's definitely not the execution of commercial batches. All of that physical stuff happens later. Stage 1, it is pure foundational design. So what do we actually get out of this phase? Well, Stage 1 has to produce a defined commercial process description, a fully documented control strategy, a specific list of critical quality attributes and process parameters with their justified ranges, and a comprehensive risk assessment. The ultimate goal of doing all this homework? Readiness to enter Stage 2. It delivers a fully documented, qualifiable process that we can actually trust. Moving on to Section 2, the quality knowledge chain from target to control. You can think of this chain as a giant funnel. We call this the quality by design or QBD chain. It translates huge macro-level drug goals into micro-level machine controls. It starts really broad at Step 1 with the QTP, and then steps down into CQAs, runs through risk and design of experiment studies, establishes our CPPs, and finally lands on a definitive control strategy. Let's break down exactly what these acronyms mean. It all starts right here with the QTPP, or Quality Target Product Profile. This is a perspective summary of the clinical characteristics your product must have to be safe and effective. We're talking about how the drug is used, its route of administration, the strength, the whole shebang. It is the ultimate clinical intent and the absolute starting block of our design blueprint. From that broad QTP, we derive our CQAs, the critical quality attributes. A CQA is a specific physical, chemical, biological, or microbiological property that must be controlled within strict limits to assure product quality. These are your absolute non-negotiables. Think of things like the drug's assay for correct potency, content uniformity for dose consistency, or the dissolution rate. If any of these fail, the drug fails, period. Now, how do we guarantee those attributes are met? That's where CPPs come in. A critical process parameter is a machine or process setting whose variability directly affects one of those CQAs. Imagine you're manufacturing a tablet. Turning a specific dial on your machine, like, say, adjusting the compression force, physically impacts the hardness of the tablet, which then directly impacts that dissolution CQA we just talked about. And remember, criticality isn't just assumed. We have to establish it with cold, hard data. Which leads us perfectly into Section 3, Science of Process Characterization, stress testing the design. Okay, notice the huge contrast in how we experiment here. If you test a process by changing one factor at a time, or OFAT, you are holding everything else fixed. The danger there? You completely miss how parameters interact with each other in the real world. A much better core QBD tool is design of experiments, or DOE. DOE intentionally varies multiple factors together. It's the scientifically sound choice because it exposes those hidden interactions. For instance, it shows you how moisture levels might drastically change the impact of your compression force. And the beautiful predictive models generated by those DOE studies? They allow us to establish safe operating ranges justified by actual data, not just habit or crossing our fingers.
We can define our exact set point, the normal operating range where we expect the day-to-day process to run, and the proven acceptable range. That's the wider boundary that we've scientifically proven will still deliver a high-quality product even if things drift a bit.
Next up, Section 4, Assessing Process Risks, Mapping the Hazards. To map out these hazards, we use tools like Failure Mode and Effects Analysis, or FMEA, across 3 specific dimensions: severity, occurrence, and detectability. Look at it this way. If a parameter's failure is highly severe and really hard to detect, like a shift in a granulation endpoint, it gets a high priority ranking. But if it's super easy to detect, like compression force, the overall risk drops. This is a game changer because it separates the critical few risks from the trivial many, showing us exactly where we need to focus our control efforts. This ties directly into a core principle of ICHQ9, which basically says, the level of effort, formality, and documentation of risk management should be proportionate to the level of risk. Simply put, we scale our efforts sensibly. If we're using a well-understood, standard platform process, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. But if we're dealing with a brand new, novel, high-risk manufacturing step, we are going to dig much, much deeper to make all that residual uncertainty explicit. And finally, Section 5, the Commercial Control Strategy, the final blueprint. Before we finalize our strategy, we absolutely have to respect scale-dependent risks, because physics change at commercial scale. If you move a powder blend that was perfectly uniform in a tiny pilot mixer into a massive commercial blender, the mixing times, the heat transfer rates, the shear behaviors, they all shift dramatically. We have to confirm these parameters on the actual commercial equipment. You can never just blindly assume equivalence. Once scale is fully accounted for, we lock in a deeply layered final control strategy. This includes input material controls to ensure consistent starting quality, process parameter controls to keep our CPPs within those justified ranges we found earlier, in-process controls, and finally, finished product testing. In this finished blueprint, every single critical quality attribute must be directly traceable to a specific control mechanism on this list. No exceptions. A massive, massive part of that strategy is in-process controls, or IPCs. The goal here is simple: catch it in the act. IPCs check quality during the manufacturing process, not just at the very end when it's too late. This gives you early detection of process drift and the actual chance to intervene. Remember those hard-to-detect risks we found in our FMEA table? IPCs are exactly how we shine a light on them, improving detectability and keeping the whole process in a strict state of control. Ultimately, all of this intense scientific heavy lifting leads to the final stage 1 output, a completely documented commercial process and control strategy summary that is 100% traceable back to our development and DOE evidence. But, and let's be crystal clear about this, signing off on this strategy simply means the design blueprint is complete and ready to qualify. It is a design record. It is not a validation certificate. It validates nothing on its own. Which leaves us with one final, pretty exciting thought. Now that we have this scientifically sound, rigorously stress-tested, and fully documented blueprint from stage 1, how do we actually prove this blueprint works in the real world when we start pouring the concrete in stage 2 process qualification? Well, that is the next big challenge in the validation lifecycle. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.